Well, hello everyone. Welcome. So, we have an interesting setup today, right? This is special for Sukkot. So, Sukkot is the festival of tents, or the festival of tabernacles, and that is what we are currently in the season of in the Jewish calendar. It ends on Tuesday, or Monday. I think it's Tuesday. Yes, it was Tuesday, so Tuesday to Tuesday. It is a full 7-day festival. So what we're going to do today is a little bit special for Sukkot. I'm going to come up first, and we're going to go through some of the traditional things from a biblical/rabbinic perspective, and see how this festival is celebrated today, and what is done to commemorate the festival of tents or tabernacles. And then Pastor Nestor will finish up giving us the application and what we can take away from it as Gentile believers, right? So, let's get right into it. Sukkot is found in Leviticus 23. That's where all the festivals are listed out. And verses 39 to 43 give out some of the main ways that you are to practice this feast and what it is. So we'll go through reading that first. This is starting Leviticus 23, verse 39. So on the 15th day of the 7th month, when you have gathered in the fruits of the land, you are to keep the feast of Adonai for 7 days. The first day is to be a Shabbat rest, and the 8th day will also be a Shabbat rest. On the first day, you are to take choice fruit of tree branches, palm trees, boughs of leafy trees, and willows of the brook, and rejoice before Adonai your God for 7 days. You are to celebrate it as a festival to Adonai for 7 days in the year. It is a statute forever throughout your generations. You are to celebrate it in the 7th month. You are to live in Sukkot for 7 days. All the native born in Israel are to live in Sukkot, so that your generations may know that I had Bnei Israel to dwell in Sukkot when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. I am Adonai your God. So from this passage, we see the main idea of Sukkot is to commemorate the time of wandering in the wilderness when the Israelites came out of Egypt. And it was 40 years, right? This is a significant step, a significant moment in the birth of the Israelite nation. So this feast is commemorating part of that journey. So today, what is done to commemorate it? Well, as is commanded here, verse 41, or verse 42, you are to live in Sukkot for 7 days. That is the biblical prescription. So today, this is a tradition carried on, right? People build up their sukkahs in backyards. Synagogues will build them in their property as well. And you either live in Sukkot, the really hardcore will live in the Sukkot and actually sleep in these tents every night. Those of us who would not be so hardcore would just eat all the meals in the tent. Or maybe you have family dinner in the tent. But the point is, spend a good amount of time in this tent that you made, right? So Sukkot, interestingly enough, is supposed to be the most festive and happy holy day. And traditionally, it's been called for much time Ziman Simchatenu, the season of our joy. So it's to rejoice. God brought them out of slavery, right? And it's a hard time, it's a tough journey, but you're out of slavery, you're out of bondage. So it's supposed to be a time of great joy and celebration for that reason. So one of the interesting things about Sukkot is that biblically, this is pretty much all we have, what I read, on how to celebrate it. So what do the rabbis do? Of course, fill in a little bit of their tradition, which is not a bad thing. These following things then are not necessarily biblically mandated, but it's how it's been practiced for centuries now. So it is how the Jewish people today still practice it. As far as the guidelines for building an actual tent, most of them are rabbinically made, and a lot of them, they have to do with the materials that you can use, on the sizing of the tent, on where to build it, on when you can start building it, because it's so soon after Yom Kippur, so you don't want to start on the day of Yom Kippur when you're doing the fasting and the resting, right? So there's prescriptions for all those things in rabbinic law. But for me, there are 2 rules specifically that stand out because they really are more meaningful, or they have deeper meaning. They're not just guidelines on the practical building of this tent, right? So one rule is that it's supposed to be a somewhat flimsy structure. That is an actual rabbinic ordinance. It's supposed to be a somewhat flimsy structure with at least 3 sides. And the idea is you're supposed to be kind of vulnerable to the elements. You're supposed to be able to imagine what it would have been like for the Israelites as they wandered through the wilderness. You're supposed to feel that somewhat vulnerability. We're so used to being in these amazing structures, solid, sound, nothing's going to touch us in here. This is different. You want to feel like they did wander. You want to feel that almost fear sometimes, right? This uncertainty, the discomfort of the weather, the discomfort of the grass, all those sorts of things. It's to imagine that. The second rule related to this is that the roof for the sukkah is supposed to be made of thatch or branches so that there's shade from the sun, but also so that rain will still fall through. And again, the idea is that feeling of being unprotected, that feeling of being vulnerable to nature, and you have to rely completely on God for your protection, for your provision, for your safety. So it's this much deeper thing than just celebrating a tent because it looks cool or something. You're supposed to feel kind of the vulnerability. You're supposed to feel the fear, the heartache, whatever it is, right? And remember that, commemorate it. And today, Judaism is so much about passing things on to the next generation, l'dor v'dor. So it's a really good time to get the kids involved, and you have kids helping decorate the tents, and they put up their art projects and all that sort of thing. But it's also to pass this on to the kids. This is what our ancestors, for the Jewish people, right? This is what our ancestors went through, the Israelites. And we're decorating and having fun now, but you teach the children as well to remember where they came from, to remember their past and what God has done for their people. And Sukkot is also very communal. So building the sukkah is supposed to be a fun family event or community synagogue event. And hospitality is also a central theme, where it's customary to invite friends and family over and eat the meal together in the sukkah. And a couple of traditional prayers are from Psalms 113, and these are all about rejoicing and thanksgiving. So that's really the central themes of this festival. So, you might be wondering what all this is up here, my wonderful foliage. So these are 4 species that are a very traditional part of celebrating Sukkot. And it's called the waving of the Lulav. That is this next traditional ceremony, which I'll end with. So this is actually taken from Leviticus 23, verse 40. It says, on the first day, you are to take choice fruit of trees, branches of palm trees, boughs of leafy trees, and willows of the brook, and rejoice before Adonai your God for 7 days. So these are the actual species that are mentioned in this passage. We have this fruit of the tree, it's called an etrog, and then in this bundle, the longest one is the lulav. The one to your left is the myrtle. Yes, the myrtle, and then the ones on your right are the arava, or the willows of the brook. So this is how the rabbis have kind of created a tradition to complete this part. Because if you read this portion in this verse, it doesn't really say exactly what to do with them, right? It says, take these 4 elements and rejoice before Adonai your God. It doesn't say exactly how to do that. So this is the way that the rabbis have come up with on how to celebrate this part. And there's different interpretations as to why these 4 elements are specifically prescribed. And you can read many different interesting rabbinic interpretations because, again, what's in the Bible doesn't really specify why. One very interesting rabbinic interpretation is that there is a symbolism of taste and smell. Taste representing learning and smell representing good deeds. So you have this etrog, it has good taste and good smell. The lulav, the long one, this has a taste but it has no smell. The myrtle, here on the left, the myrtle, it has smell but it doesn't have taste. And then the right one, it has neither. The willow has neither smell nor taste. And if you replace that with learning and good deeds, the rabbis say that there are 4 types of people. Some have learning and good deeds, some have one without having the other, and some have neither. Right? And that is a rabbinic interpretation. But they also say that real community is binding the 4 kinds of people together. So, interesting interpretation. Not necessarily biblical, but something to learn from. What really is the most relevant thing for us to realize is that these elements are supposed to represent joy, right? You're giving your thanksgiving and your praise to God at the time of the harvest. If you think back to the agricultural society, this was big. It's not quite as important in the same way it is to us now as it was to them then. But you're rejoicing and praising God for the harvest, for His provision. So I'm going to go through and doing the traditional waving of the lulav so you guys see what it's like. And before saying this, it's shaking in all directions. So I'll explain first. You shake forward, and then, well, technically east. You shake to the east, then to the south, to the west, then to the north, above your head, and below your head, or below, closer to your feet. And this has a few actual representations as well. By doing this, you kind of symbolize God's sovereignty and divine rule over all of nature. right? That everything is under his control. So you wave in each of the directions to kind of affirm his sovereignty. And before doing this, we say the following blessing. So I'll go ahead and read the blessing and then wave the Lulav. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehechianu v'kimanu v'higyanu lazman hazeh. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who has granted us life and sustained us and permitted us to reach this season. So now, show the wave. Facing east first. And it may look a little funny to us, right? A little foreign. But really, the thought process behind it is God is sovereign over everything, right? His provision is over everything. He is the one controlling. So, significance of this little traditional portion. Eating and living in these temporary structures, you're supposed to remember, refocus your mind from the material possessions of the world that don't matter. Refocus it onto the things that really are important in life. This all fades away, right? It's the provision of God that sustains us and that we need to be focused on. And again, this agricultural element, the provision of God that we need to praise him for and always be thankful for, never taking it for granted.